Welcome everyone to our project recipe event. Here we are with our very first project recipe event featuring one of our very own members. Anna Scheutz is joining us here from Sweden and will be sharing with us a concept that she has talked about since we were members at Ponga. The idea of dress your ancestors. And this came up once or twice, and it came up so many times. I asked her to tell us about a project she had been working on herself, and if we could use the word dress your ancestors, because I just love that concept so well. As I've said in some of the promotional materials, I think of it as the way I did paper dolls, where you put a dress on them and then you think through all of it. But today, in a digital environment, we're doing so much more, aren't we? So the logistics for these kinds of events, as you know, are very simple. I'll just give a quick summary up here. Then Anna will speak for roughly half the period, and that leaves plenty of time for a discussion. And if we want to go on afterwards, I call that the after party, where I turn off the recording and we can go ahead and chat further. I think all of you are at this point pretty familiar with Google Meet, a little different perhaps than you might have seen in other environments. I use it, quite frankly, for the same reason I am a little skimpy about a lot of the projects we use here, so that we can do this community for free. It also gives me kind of all the key bits that I need, and we all learn new tools, don't we? So the recording, this event will be recorded, and I pop these recordings right into the podia.com based forum, which allows us to have links to all of the resources. I'm going to ask Anna for her presentation, as well as the recipe we've written up about how you can do this yourself. It's also a great place where we can continue and have an ongoing conversation about this and other things. As I've done in the past, I've got a little QR code from our QR code tutorial. We use that so you can understand how to use that with your phone, and ideally think about how you can use that to combine media, online digital environments, together with something that's a physical object that you do in the phone. Here, the physical object is the screen you're in front of you as we go through a presentation, so you could pull up details in the forum without disturbing the screen. As I like to say right at the top, this is not a pitch. Our free community is intended to be a nonprofit, something that we can do going forward. It's an open discussion, a place to try new ideas and explore things you hadn't thought of. I am not talking about any vendor. I am using Canva for this because it's for my own convenience, but I'm not selling any platform at all. I have nothing to sell, so that works that way. And with that, I'm going to take out my stop sharing here and let Anna take over as our special guest. Anna, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I've seen most of you before. So I don't need to introduce myself, I assume, but I need to introduce the project. So I'm a member of a group on Facebook in Sweden, which is called Efterforskning, which would be after researching, translated into English. And they started during the beginning of COVID and were sending live stream once a week. Now it's every fortnight. And they do live stream at the same time on Facebook and YouTube. And then it gets recorded and it gets kept on YouTube, so you can go and watch it later as well. And they pick different subjects. From the beginning, it was very much about helping people to understand what tools were there for family research and especially for DNA and family research, and how to use these tools and get around it and ask questions. But it turned more into all these things around to get to know more about your ancestors, basically. And it's about the stories about your ancestors. And people can be invited to come into the live stream and share stories and show photos if they want to. And I have quite often been invited to share stories. And one week the theme was set beforehand to send us a story about an ancestor you would want to meet if it was possible to time travel. And there's quite a few people with interesting stories in my tree. No world famous ones, really, but with interesting stories. And I got stuck on my maternal grandmother's paternal grandfather's mother. So my 3 times great grandmother. Because I had a photo of this old lady. And she lived a very long life, 97 years. So she was born in 1813 and died in 1910. And this was a period when a lot of things happened historically in Sweden and in Europe and in the world. So it would have been marvelous from that perspective to have a chat with her. But also because there is a lot of secrets on that family line that I would want to ask her directly if she can help me with the answers. So I wrote a story about her, looked further into her, which is in Swedish called to dress your ancestors. So I'm going to start sharing. I will lose you when I'm doing that.
You won't lose us. We're right here.
All right, it's taking time. Come on, there. And so this is the part of the family tree. The woman at the top, Sofia Charlotta, is my 3 times great grandmother. And then we have her 3 children. We have Axel Edwards.
We're still seeing the title slide, Anna. I think you need to go to the second slide.
Oh, it doesn't work then.
No, it's not advancing.
Ah.
If you have multiple screens, we're looking at the slide set.
Right. Can you see it now then?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
So we have Sofia Charlotta, which is this picture. Mm-hmm. Her 3 children. And then we have Axel Edwards' children and Alma Charlotta's children. So it's the grandchildren. And I'm not going to read all the names, but then we have the great-grandchildren, the great-great-grandchildren. At the bottom group is the 3 times great-grandchildren, which is where I fit in. So this was sort of the information I had when I started. And this is how I'm connected to her. So it's my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, and her. So what I found out when I was looking into her picture, so I looked at the history and wrote that down and mixed it with the family history. And I wrote a chapter in a book. So this is the beginning of the chapter. And the chapter is in this book. So that's the Swedish version and that's the English version, which is like an anthology of people in my family tree or families that have interesting stories. Chasing the Story is about the branch which she is on. So it's 2 different books. And I've also put my findings on Facebook, so a blog. and this is what I use for writing my books. And this is where I were in the live stream and telling her story, these two, just to show. But basically, you take a photo of a person or something that is interesting. You don't have to have a photo. You can do whatever. Pick something that gets you interested. And then you try to find out as much as possible about this person, what specifically happened to in this case, Sofia Charlotta and her family members. You make a timeline, and then you add all the events happening around that could have affected her in different ways. So you explore all these things, and that will become the story, and that is how you dress a name with date and places into a person that is a specific individual with a history. And then you just have to find a way of sharing it. And in my case, it was YouTube, Facebook, books, blog, and that is what has been done. I've then come up with other ideas for the future, how I can share it in other ways, because you will get more questions that arises while you find this story out. And this is only one person. I have over 9,000 people in my family tree. So then, you know, I move on to another person that is interesting, that I want to know more about, like a man who was, so my great-grandmother's brother who was on the Titanic and didn't survive. So I then tried to find more about him. So that's another project. So it is addictive, and you can, with this little small project with just one person, and then you take another person and another person. They don't have to be connected with each other. And then that way you can build up the stories. But it's a way of understanding them better. And based on what Barbara talked about when she talked about her recipe, I've built this one up. So I'm going to have rework this a bit better, and then but have something that looks similar. So she was born in 1813 at this place, which is this house. And it's called Ingenting, which translated to English is nothing. Literally nothing. She got married in 1845, but not on this map. She got married in central Stockholm. And in 1861, her husband died at this place. And in 1880, can you see where I'm pointing?
Yeah,
yep.
Looks great.
Yeah, so in 1880, one of her grandsons called Birger was born here. And in 1884, another grandson was born here. And that grandson was called Ragnar, and it's my great-grandfather. And then in 1910, she died also at this place. And this is where the family grave is for her and her husband, and 15 more people, descendants. During her lifetime, Sweden had 6 kings. Charles XIII, Charles XIV, Johan or John, Oscar I, Charles XV, Oscar II, and Gustav number 5. So that's quite a lot of kings during her lifetime. And Charles XIV is the first Bernadotte. And I put a little QR code here that takes you to the blog and the blog about her. So this is something that I'm going to tweak a bit and then share with my nieces, because they want things to be a bit more digital than analog. But they also like a very nice scavenger hunt. So I'm working on a scavenger hunt where I'm thinking of giving them a digital map where I will put points in a garden, because they have a very big garden, and where they have to go to the points, and then they have to answer a question that has to do with the family. And there will be a QR code that takes you to the family tree, so you can look up the right answer if you want to cheat. But you take a guess. So this would be Muffa is their nickname for their maternal grandfather, which was my dad. And his maternal grandmother is one of these women, the biological maternal grandmother. And when they find the place, they answer the question, they collect the thing that is there. And then they go to the next place and they repeat. And the idea is that they collect things, which means that when they have finished answering all the questions, they will have to build something out of all the things they have collected. So it's an interactive scavenger hunt. And I'm going to close this one now because I want to see you all.
That's so cool.
So my nephew is getting married next summer in Somerset. So I was thinking, leading up to that, to do this scavenger hunt around the family. So it has to be, this means that it will be family on my sister's side and on my brother-in-law's side. Therefore, you could see sort of that were questions about Swedish people. There were questions about Channel Islands and about Scotland and so on. And there will probably be something about Wales as well, because that turns up in the tree. I also normally, so it's normally one correct answer, but I always have a tricky question where nothing is correct or everything is correct. So the one about the authors. So Alec Gibson, who lives in London, he has written a book that you can buy on Amazon if you want to, but it's a very good book. And then the question is, which of the names, which of the authors that I had listed can be found in the Swedish part of the family tree? And the fact is that all of them can. So the first one was a working class author and poet. The second one was the man who wrote The Long Ships. I don't know if you've heard about that. It was made into a film in the 50s, I think, 40s, 50s, about Vikings.
Right.
And he's a second cousin to my grandfather, and he wrote that book. And the third one, Anna Scheutz, is the equivalent of W.E. Johns in England, the one who wrote about Biggles and the flying things. And Torsten Scheutz in Sweden wrote similar books in Swedish because he was also a pilot. So he did his training in the US and in Germany. And then during the Second World War, he had silver wings. He was not in the Swedish Air Force, but he was one of 8 civilians who were given silver wings because they were very good pilots.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all authors in different ways.
So if I can circle back, Anna, to the way you've opened this up, you've created something as a way to, in a multidimensional way, tell a story of one of your ancestors, and then built that into something specifically targeted for essentially distribution into these events on Facebook, and then once you've got it, you can do it in a lot of different ways. And then you've started to describe these ways to engage the younger generations in the historical record, in the famous ancestors, in the charming ancestors, in the fun and interesting ancestors. This Sofia Charlotta, who lived, there's a plane flying over very low, who lived this nearly 100 years through the incredible Industrial Revolution and 6 kings, has to be so full of different stories to do that. How do you pitch questions? Just like putting together something that would be interesting to people, how do you pitch? Frankly, in my family, I'm happy if they can recognize each other, put face to names in the group, but maybe that's just because it's a big group.
So with Sofia Charlotta, it was my choice, and because I was given this task to sort of pick someone and tell a story, and I did, and I thought it was more interesting to picking her than picking these other people that also have very interesting stories, but there is already things out there in books, in magazines, online about them, and on videos.
And so often the women are forgotten. Let's be honest.
And because I have an uncle whose wife has been a city guide in Stockholm, and a historical city guide. So she was taking tourists on guided tours around the old towns especially, but then outside as well, and telling the history. And she got a bit fed up with the history being the men's history of Stockholm. So she wrote a book about famous and infamous women in Stockholm.
But she's a great storyteller.
That goes from the Middle Ages and up till modern time. And she does it for the different districts of the city, and she then did guided tours about it as well. But it's a very good book because it's not only famous people, it's children and women who were accused of and to be involved with when it came to the witches and witch trials and stuff like that. So it's about people whose story hasn't been told before as well. And not everyone was born and lived all their life in Stockholm. Some people ended up in Stockholm. They were born on the west coast or in the north of Sweden or something like that.
Right.
And due to being a famous author or something like that, they ended up in Stockholm.
Yeah.
So it all depends on which era it was.
Right.
But that gave me the idea. But other people that I've been looking into, it could be someone in the family who asks a question, sort of. So this person in the tree, who is my great grandfather, how come he moved to Stockholm and why? And where did he live? What does his timeline look like? How did he move? When did he move? And did he take the surname that our family branch has now? Or was it someone else? So they give me some questions. And while trying to find the answers to these questions, you unlock the story about that person and the family around.
Yeah.
And my mum did similar things when she was still alive. She would ask questions, I have this great grandmother who we don't know. They say that she was married 3 times. Okay, so question is then quite easy. Was she married 3 times?
Right. And why?
And if so, why?
Right.
So, and that gives you the idea, because you then have to go and find these answers. And while you're doing that, you are finding the story about this person.
Right. I also wanted to point out that, with so many things that are acceptable today that they were not 50 years ago, certainly when many of us, our parents were our age, and young adults, things like homosexuality, like same-sex marriage, like mistresses, and affairs and suicides, adoption, never mind things that are technically possible, like surrogacy, that didn't even exist in any technical form then. And I know certainly in my own family tree that this ability to talk about something as taboo as divorce was, has opened up all kinds of things. And in, cultures outside of certainly our environment here in North America, those kinds of things were much more common, whether it was multiple wives or concubines or things like that. And, to just be able to talk about it as, opens up and makes stories, frankly, more interesting.
What I found, because it's actually quite a lot of people in the tree that has been married more than once, but there is normally a natural reason. So men is normally married more often than women, because the women died during childbirth,
Right.
which was quite common, quite
Right.
far into the 1800s still. And so it was quite common that they then remarried because they had lots of kids already.
Yeah.
and sometimes they remarried, a sibling to the dead wife. If we take a wife, for example, it could be that they got a housekeeper and then they married the housekeeper.
Yeah.
And so on. So there is lots of different things, and it depends on, I found, where they lived. And it's like you say, you have to connect your geographical history. Where do I do this research? Where did this person live? So if they lived in Wales, it's very different from living in Stockholm or in Bergslagen, sort of in the countryside where all the miners were.
Yeah.
So you would live very different lives, and there would be different things affecting how everyone around you would look at things and what happened and stuff like that. So there was a really good book that was released in Sweden last year. I don't know if there is similar books in UK and in Canada and the US, but it was a history book, Swedish history for family researchers. And it takes the Swedish history for the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, and looks at what happened during this century that affects us when we are doing family research. So, for example, in the late 1700s in Sweden, we had a king who decided that we have way too many newborn babies that gets killed because of single mothers. So he decided that single mothers could be unknown in church records, in birth records. They didn't have to put their name up to get the numbers down.
Wow.
And that will affect your family research.
Right, right.
You had, from 1842, anyone who wanted to go to school in Sweden had the right to do it. Didn't matter how poor they were. If you wanted to go to school, you had the right to go to school. So it wasn't something for the rich people only anymore.
Very progressive.
That also affects a lot of things.
Yeah. You know, the notion of how local history and historical timelines blend in to family history is itself an important topic. And I will certainly look for books like that in the US. I believe there are. But I also want to highlight another point that you made, because you just zipped right past it. And it's the kind of thing that is why I wanted you to be a speaker here. There are so many little innovations in what you do and how you do it. I think it's really insightful and inspiring to the kinds of things that we can all do with our own family stories. For instance, many of you may not know, but if you look on Instagram at Paddle Force, which is her handle on Instagram, she's got a couple of pictures of the charming project she's been working on to bring history physically, locally into trees, into neighborhoods, to tell the story of housing that was there, to tell the story of people who lived there before. The idea of taking with a QR code, see our QR code presentation, but also to take that idea and then make it very, very local to a family gathering, weddings coming up, getting all the kids tied into the logic of a family where they can put names to faces in a family group, and using QR codes in a scavenger hunt. So they go out and do the research and pull things together. And I'm still mystified as to how you do that while judging how hard or easy it should be to make it just challenging enough to be fun, but something that a 9-year-old and a 16-year-old and a 4-year-old would all find fun. Boggles my mind. But the idea of constantly shifting media, I mean, these are the things that I'm paying attention to and trying to drive what we're doing here with Projectkin. I think is where a lot of that really fun innovation comes from. And I'm super excited about that and how we can be taking these kinds of things further. In the notes from the program, I'm going to include a link to this Readsy, for example, the e-publishing platform that you mentioned that you use to publish some books, and using Facebook and YouTube live streaming for events seems intimidating, but it's actually used quite a bit for this kind of community creation. I haven't quite had the courage to do that yet. We're a little small, but that idea of bringing a community together around an idea and carrying it forward is just, delightful. Anna, did you disappear? There you are.
No, I'm here. I was thinking of adding this. So for me, the project about Sofia Charlotta, that's one person, one picture, one person, and to tell her story. And that doesn't mean that project is over, because all my projects are live and change all the time. They grow and go in different directions. And this project that you talked about, Barbara, with the cottages and putting signs up and the history about who lived in that cottage and things like that, that's the other side of the spectrum, going from one person to maybe 50 buildings, which is a heritage project where we are more people involved. So I do the family research bit together with a few others, and then other people tell the folklore. Someone is good at the maps and know where the ruins are in the forest and the watchstones you find the stones that they used to build the cottage, and
Wow.
so on. So that's a much it's the same kind of project, but on a much larger scale.
Yeah.
So, but I think that it's important to you start with a small project, then it's up to you how big it can grow and what directions you want it to go in. But if you try to take on a really big project from the beginning, you might not get that far because, oh, this was too hard.
Yeah.
So start with the little projects and then put them up next to each other.
Yeah.
And it grows from there. And what the idea with the map that you showed with the arrows and the timeline, and it didn't show that in the PowerPoint, but what I did was you start with the map and then you add one piece at a time, 1 year at a time, and stuff like that. And then you can put a voiceover to it that tells the story about this person. And then if you do it as a presentation, as a slideshow, you can then export it as a video. And I don't know how many of you have YouTube's account, but you can have a YouTube account without sort of having live streams and all these things.
Yeah.
You can put up videos there that are private. And then what you can do is you can create a link or a QR code that links to that video. And you can then decide who to share it with. And that QR code, I'm thinking of putting it as a picture in the family tree. So when you look at the media for a person, there is a QR code that can take you to a larger story, a video. Because there is also, I've found online on YouTube, long interviews with now dead people in my family tree. And I want to, instead of downloading that and upload it, because that gets too plottery, it's better to have a link to YouTube where that video is, the place where it is, and people can go directly there and find it. So that was sort of, because then it makes the family tree much more interactive,
right,
and more fun for sort of the generations, the younger generations, the ones after me. So my nieces and nephews and that generation, and next step down again.
Right. That's absolutely brilliant. And I think that is a key concept, that our parents, our grandparents, when they worked on family history, their only real option was, and some of us have these handwritten, histories or typed histories. I have talked many times about the benefit of a grandmother who was able to self-publish, which was itself a technology to be able to tell those stories. We now live in this plethora of media, and I love the encouragement that we don't have to think about having done this little bit of research. It's living. You can keep coming back to it, because for an entire life you're taking a stamp in time. And there's so much more to discover as you keep asking questions and you fill in other bits. You can keep coming back. So having means to be able to keep coming back and adding to it, and then adding to it with content from anywhere on the web, is also very powerful, as we keep thinking about ways that we can be keeping them private and keeping them archived. The platforms that are out there are not designed for this. They just aren't, because there's no money in it this way. But I think what we can do is be teaching each other these creative ways to pull things together, like a link to a private YouTube. YouTube has a distinction between private and unlisted. Unlisted can be embedded, but still is not discovered. it could still be found. Private is truly private in that you need a password to still get there. Not truly, truly private, which is you lock the file and you can't get into it anymore.
So,
Which happens.
so I've used YouTube for this. So, so when each of my parents died, and when it came to the funeral, we put together, you know, the funeral company. They have these websites with memorial sites.
Yeah.
What I did go and find lots of photos because I have all the family photos. So I did like a slideshow, but turn it into a video that was from, you know, just before they turned one and up until shortly before they died, and different parts of their life. And then I did put music to, and because it's sort of unlisted and or private, you don't have, you can use sort of music without paying for it.
Right.
Otherwise it gets
you can
blocked.
only do that with private. Actually, unlisted is not okay because it's still public effectively.
And so for my dad's presentation, for example, we did pick a Glenn Miller song because he was a jazz guy and he liked Glenn Miller. So of course we picked Glenn Miller because we weren't allowed to have that in church. We had to have a hymn instead. We managed to get Louis Armstrong in and a few other jazz. Nat King Cole, I think we had as well. but
they were gospel singers.
But then for our mum, it was like she was always into classical music. So of course in church it was classical music, and then we had opera, Time to Say Goodbye. Or her slideshow. And we had a part from a poem from Forest Finn, from the area where she has roots in. So we made this. So we made these videos, but we also have 2 videos that were made from photos as slide and with music from weddings. We have all this on YouTube, and then we can share the link to people who should have access to it. Right.
I mean, from an anthropology perspective, having these rites of passage, these moments in someone's life, like, you know, new baby events. In the Jewish tradition, you have bar mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs, and you have weddings, and you have funerals, and you have graduations and retirement parties. All one of our members actually just put on a big event that her family has been gathering for 100 years for Rosh Hashanah every year. And so they have all of these pictures they've put together. I'm hoping to have her present that as an event, as a project. I've been trying to parse these things into little definable projects that can be repeated as a recipe. But what I love here is you're opening it all up to realize that what you do is one little recipe you can be reusing and retelling when you think about what the opportunities are to do that and the multiple media that one might do it in. Video is perfect for essentially a linear stream when you're presenting at a performance or you have an event. There is the pause everyone and watch the video. Or it's often done in a wedding reception. You have just the going on in the background with things that they loved. Or, you know, having a place that you go to visit is different. It is really important to think about your audience, just as you were writing a poem or writing a novel. You're thinking about who your audience is that's going to consume, that's going to take the delivery of the story that you're going to tell.
Yeah. It's a part that sort of I'm trying to teach beginners in family research, is that they start and they find out names and things like that, and they go a few generations back, and then they find that, oh, I need to find out this and that, or they find out, oh, well, this person lived somewhere else, not here, and worked as a police officer. How do I find out more about that? And that is the beginning of any of these projects, whether it's a photo or, because the question is there is a question. You want to know more. And then that moves your research further.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you do family research or whether it's just that you want to find out about specific people in the family that you're curious about.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is the same. You have a question, you set a goal, and then you need to stick to that person. You can't sort of go on in other directions. You need to stick with that person and follow that person from birth to death. And in Sweden, I'm lucky because I can follow them with every single move they do. Even if they move twice a year, I can follow every single move they do, because we have house examinations where the ministers were coming out and basically testing people on how well they could read and write and understand the Bible and know the Bible.
Right. Right.
So because we had a state church
Right.
in Sweden at this time, and so that makes it possible for me to make a very good timeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, I know, is much harder for all of you because you have 10-year census.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unless you have a written story that someone has been writing down that is kept and you have access to it, you don't have the same access to that information, but you can still work it in a similar way. And then how you present it and what way you do it in, whether you do it on paper or digital or both, and what software you use and things like that. It's up to you, depending on how you're going to present it, who you're going to present it to. So I'm not going to give you, I've given you lots of sort of ones that I use, and I do use Photoshop for my photos, for example.
Yeah.
But not everyone has access to that. There are free versions, programs that are very similar to Photoshop that you can use.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just highlighting that one.
I wonder if we can sort of open it up here to a larger conversation about projects. And, you know, Anne, I know you in the UK right now, you're working on your book in Scotland, and all of the talks that you're doing on photogenealogy. Linda, Marcy, and Mark, I wonder if I could call you up a little bit and tell me a little bit about where you are with respect to projects. And I'll make it easy for you, because what I think I've heard a lot from a number of people is the idea of doing projects is appealing but intimidating, and you don't know what to do. Or have you already picked a thing that you're thinking about doing? Tell me more.
Could I just butt in for just a minute and comment on Anna's project? Is that okay?
Please. Yes.
Anna, your project is brilliant. I love it because you started with like physical artifacts. You digitized them and you used multiple digital channels to get it out there. Then you made it interactive with QR codes. You had a perfect audience in mind that you pitched it at. And then just to cap it all, you have a scavenger hunt. So not only is it interactive, it's active. Kids get off their bottoms and actually start running around doing things. I think your project is just fantastic. I love the way you explained it, starting small and then building up. Brilliant, Anna. Congratulations. I really like that.
Thank you. It's probably because I'm a trained youth worker.
Sure, that helped.
It probably comes from that.
I think the point you made about knowing your audience is really important, knowing what to pitch at, knowing what you're trying to achieve before you start is so important in any of these projects, I think.
Exactly right. Thanks, Anne. I was trying to keep you get you off the hook at midnight, but
It's only
you summarized it beautifully. Marcy, go ahead.
I have a couple of things. Actually, yesterday, I talked to my sister-in-law because I did tell you that my mother-in-law was in hospital, Barb. No one else knew about that, but she's now back at her long-term care home. And yes, she has shingles, but she doesn't seem to be too aware of it. But I've gotten her talking different times about things in the past. And when she was a young girl, her mother, Muriel, took in 3 of her brother's children because he was a multiple marrier and he had a ton of children and couldn't look after them all. So with the 3rd or 4th wife, she just said, no, I'm not doing it. So, and her mother and Muriel, being very kind-hearted, took in these 3. Now she had 3 of her own, my mother-in-law and her 2 younger brothers. Now in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, it has some very old houses where sea captains lived, and they had lots of children, and they were opulent and everything. Now, one of these houses that's very close to one of our paddling lakes for canoeing and so on they call it the Spider Rat House, which is very revealing. I guess one of their main activities, these 6 children, was burying creatures they found dead around the dwelling and in and outside. So Lori, my sister-in-law, has said, it's okay for me to go in and record her telling these stories, about all the different cousins and her own brothers. Yeah. So that's
awesome.
one thing that's come up.
brilliant.
Talk about a great way to get kids. You can see an 8-year-old little boy, forget all this family history stuff. Tell me more about the spiders and rats. I mean, you got to get them where they are. And suddenly they have this affection.
Draw pictures, and you can turn it into a video using her story and the children's drawings, and create a story that way.
Absolutely.
Hopefully.
Absolutely. In all seriousness, there's some I can get the links for you, but some of my 2 very favorite kind of storytelling inspiration videos that are out there on YouTube also. One is the Ken Burns, the mighty filmmaker Ken Burns, who does so many films with photos and story. So that's brilliant. I think it's actually a multi-part series. And then Ira Glass, who has a podcast called This American Life radio program, which is about, he talks about storytelling in audio form and how thinking about it in terms of this happened and then that happened and then this happened. There's actually a brilliant one about a scary house. That is a series that he's told. But I bring that up as inspiration. Don't get intimidated. Just get in the mood. Listen to that and then know you can do it because they're your family. They want to know these stories because they know the protagonists. Fabulous.
Yeah.
Mark, you've just stepped up. Do you have a story to tell us about what you're interested in working on? Just remember, you got to hit the mute button to be able to unmute to be able to join us. Come on in anytime.
There he was gone.
Barbara, you're muted now.
Thank you. Linda, you've talked about your mother's or your grandmother's diary, I believe, right? As a project?
Yes. But it's too hard. A lot of it is too hard to read. So I've decided that I'm going to do for us siblings, my siblings and me, a little thing kind of like you did in picture frame. I might just, I don't know if I'll put it in picture frame, but on a poster or something.
Uh-huh.
So I picked out the where we were all born, where we were baptized. I haven't got much farther than that because I'm thinking, now what kind of a picture am I going to use? Because I don't have any, well, I have a say out on a snow pile or something when we were all little, but you know, one is from there to there. So I don't know what I'll do with that. I think I'll just use maybe a group photo that we had taken when I think my brother was about 7 down to the,
Yeah.
and it might be easier just to put it under that kind of.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on at the moment. I've got, well, I think I'll make it probably 8 by 10 or so. And I'll just make a little, and then I guess I'll try and use a QR code to tell the rest of kind of what's happened. I don't know if I'll tell their whole life. I don't.
Yeah.
The problem with us is, you know, our grandparents came from England and we don't really know anything about the people in England.
Yeah.
We haven't met anybody. We don't really know. And we only knew of a couple aunts and uncles that were related to my grandpa, I think. And other than that, we don't know a lot about the family tree back in England.
Yeah.
There's a
But you're
95
telling the
year old
story here. You're
Sorry?
catching the story. You're catching the story here and pushing the ball forward for the next generation. That's what's most important.
Yeah. Well, because like I said, my son was not really interested in me doing this because he didn't know them, right? So he was more interested in mom and dad and our family. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm hoping that my 2 grandsons, I mean, they're growing up, nobody's married, but I'm hoping that they will be interested somewhere along the line, maybe when they get older. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
So
that's great. That's
what
great.
I'm working on.
So we're near the top of the hour. I wanted to ask a quick question and then tell you a little bit about next week. My first question is, it's occurred to me that, you know, Anna, you talked a bit about using YouTube in different ways. Would it make sense to do a session on a tutorial session on using video? Would that be helpful? Yeah.
Yeah, it could be possible. Yeah, it could be.
Yeah. I mean, I feel confident to do it. But I'm thinking there's a lot of different kinds of tools out there, especially today with things like simultaneous translation of the, you know, of the captions, which by the way, yeah, anyway, it could be done. That's hard, but there are so many ways to do captions now that are very, very powerful and free, which is kind of amazing. So I'd be very happy to do that. I'll think about that one. Next week, Tuesday, I'm doing one on, which is the October 3rd, on using Canva. So it's a lot more, it's a tutorial on using Canva. And so it's a lot more hands-on, a lot more how to do it. And it's funny, you know, you're working with PowerPoint, Anna, and talked about pulling it into a video. In working on that presentation, it dawned on me that there's a slippery slope really between presentations and whiteboards, because it's all about visual presentation of information. And you're doing it for someone to interact with later, or you're doing it for someone to interact with in real time, or rather to sit back and view in real time. I won't get into a lot of that, but that's why there's sort of different ways to think about media and think about delivering your story. And I can show a few tips and tricks about slipping, navigating around it, which is really the hard part. And there's a lot of other tools. I haven't really experimented with Google's Jamboard, but now all the people that do real video meetings are in the business of now adding in whiteboard technology, because real-time whiteboard is something people want to be able to do. And I'm not sure that really applies to us as much. So anyway, are there any last thoughts you want to wrap up with, Anna?
No, I think I hope that I've inspired people to take the first step to a small little project. And it doesn't have to be a whole chapter in a book about a person. It can be like 5 or 10 minute feedback verbally.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to come from you. It could be, as I said, other family members, that the questions they ask, you turn that into a project to find out more about this specific person.
I love that. And curiosity is such a great place to end with. Fabulous. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now, but you all can certainly stay on. Just a moment, please. Yes.